Okay, today I'm continuing reading from chapter 1 of my book, Eco-literate Music Pedagogy, published in 2017. Music Educating in Place. Living on soil is living in place with human and non-human animals, geographies, climates, and cultures. Actual places are not easily generalized. As the old saying goes, the map is not the territory. Place-conscious pedagogy has recently been considered in music education. Stauffer makes a distinction between space, which has to do with geography, and place, connected to lived experiences in a space. This distinction is useful in cultivating a philosophy on soil because it is people's lived experience, or lack of those experience, cultivating ecological consciousness that are the starting point for eco-literate music pedagogy. Music educators have noted that place-based and place-conscious pedagogies can benefit students in rural places. It has been argued that because they are small enough to be managed democratically and humanely, rural places might provide the best opportunities for healing the education profession's errors. Music education for rural students can lead to feelings of being out of place. This out-of-placeness can be understood culturally, musically, and physically, but rural places can be understood as valuable resources for school musics. As Corbett suggests, first of all, a good music curriculum will help rural youth understand that their Uncle Ernie is a legitimate music producer. Place-conscious pedagogy can be inclusive and relevant to students. Press noted, a place-conscious and relational approach to music education that engenders musical knowledge while also fostering bridging relationships within the classroom and community becomes more relevant and inclusive of more people. Eco-literate music pedagogy is for people living in urban, suburban, and rural places. Place-conscious opportunities abound, exploring urban gardening, urban soundscapes, etc., even in the most densely populated cities. And within their endless grass deserts, monocultures of the worst suburbs are in a constant battle with diversification of species and cultures. Through conscientization and work, all places can become more ecologically sustainable. Music education scholars Benedict and Bates in the U.S. and Schmidt, analyzing Brazilian NGOs, utilize Grunwald's 2003 place-conscious critical pedagogy, in which place-based education, with its emphasis on local solutions, environmental awareness, is combined with critical pedagogy that encourages and enables students to interrogate context along with multiple forms of oppression in which they live. Bates, 2011. A critical pedagogy of place opens space for teachers and students to interrogate the intersections of culture and ecosystems. A critical pedagogy of place is harmonious with a philosophy on soil to the extent to which ecological justice is a critical issue that arises in the classroom and where local places and local people living on the margin are respected and loved. Little research is done on place-based music education. Some research, even while using place-based theory, uses a conceptualization of place inconsistent with the philosophy on soil. Brooks' case studies research of a British Columbia, Canada music education program noted that place-based pedagogy can strengthen students' connection to in-school, local, and provincial communities. Van Dusen's case study explored the perceived value of a music program in Midwest USA by community and school members. Themes that arose were community history, school commitment to providing a comprehensive education to students, and music teacher interest in and openness to community. Spring used narrative methodology to study 4 rural music educators in Ontario, Canada. They viewed their programs as enhancing the relationship between the school and communities, enhancing a sense of pride as well as recognizing responsibilities toward global communities. It is notable that this research is qualitative it may be that place-based practices are best studied on a small scale. In a similar manner to the qualitative music education research, Gray and Thompson's mixed method study looked at an arts-based approach, including music, generally in their case study of Touched by the Earth, a year-long Australian enrichment program. Students had conversations with artists, scientists, historians, and Aboriginal elders, which served as an immersion in the place as creative stimulus for film, dance, poetry, writing, drawing, and music. A music education relevant task shared in the write-up was a group project. Students create a video of themselves having fun in nature, including music. The researchers found that love and connection with the earth are central to promoting deep engagement and indelible learning. The Commons. The Commons can provide music educators with an opportunity to understand the ecological crises, defined as, quote, the environment that is available for use by the entire community. These commons encompass forms of aesthetic expression, and that's from Chet Bowers, including musics, and that's Bates. Enclosure of the commons, privatizing and monetizing previously shared resources, has been considered one of the most relevant challenges today. Developing ecological literacy begins with cultivating ecological consciousness in local places. People, though not all people, have been living and musicking sustainably in their commons for many generations. Consider the place-bound wisdom of indigenous peoples fighting ecological degradation today, mentioned early in this chapter. Global aims, unresponsive to local understandings, can be catastrophic for environments. In contrast, indigenous groups have lived sustainably for many generations, rejecting short-term profit if it means long-term pollution. Additionally, enclosure, when considered within Schaeffer's soundscape, provides an interesting point of critical analysis. The silence that is the background of natural sounds is being impacted and closed by the spread of industrial culture, and that was in Bowers. Daily, in cities, suburbs, and rural places, beautiful soundscapes are enclosed for private profit. The enclosure parallels ecological destruction. It is often the loudest, least beautiful machines doing the most ecological damage, and it is the loss of untouched wilderness that most contributes to loss of species diversity, and the resultant diversity of musics of birds, amphibians, insects, and so on. Soundscape diversity may or may not be a problem to be addressed by music educators, but there seems to be an opening owing to our understanding of timbre, texture, and other musical elements musicians consider. Enclosure leads to the loss of both cultural and ecological diversity. Enclosure is characterized by privatization, displacement, standardization, stratification, and degradation. Analysis of music in the age of global industrial economy begins with analysis of loss of diversity. Bowers points out the diversity of the world's cultural knowledge systems that influence whether the local commons will continue to exist on a sustainable basis is now being threatened by youth who are turning away from intergenerational knowledge to their communities. Musics the industrial economy produces represent an unsustainable monoculture. Fewer genres, fewer musicians. Musician redefined as professional musician, leaving community musicians as obsolete. And from Theobald, quote, we have rendered the average citizen of the country politically impotent. Music becomes something produced elsewhere, or maybe even nowhere, as children are taught to be helpless as musicians and need to be elsewhere, uprooted modern individuals. Even without the music education industry, the music industry educates children every day, transforming people into interchangeable morsels of population ruled by the laws of scarcity. Because the ecological crises are global, local understandings are the beginning, but not the end of cultivating ecological literacy. Particular challenges to cultivating ecologically sustainable local places involve transboundary problems such as climate change, pollution, deforestation. Dietz et al. Suggests small-scale institutions have an advantage in understanding commons governance. However, the challenge to human survival is to develop and deploy understandings of large-scale commons governments quickly enough to avoid large-scale tragedies that will otherwise ensue. They recommend adaptive governance, allocating authority at multiple levels of local to global nesting. This type of approach seems appropriate for those commons where local people have a history and claim to the land and water. Sustainable policy becomes especially challenging when we begin to consider crises in those commons where people do not live. For instance, tourism in Antarctica, whale overfishing in much of the South Pacific. This approach may leave Ivan Illich's conception of philosophy as soil, quote, something vastly different from managing behavior on a shattered planet, but not necessarily. Ecological literacy must still foster the earthly virtue of self-limitation, leaving open, local, grounded approaches to self-limitation. A philosophy on soil provides a grounded approach to thinking about ecological crises. A type of gardening, respecting the wisdoms of people in other places, leads to ecological literacy and can improve our chance at survival through wise collective action. The social majorities, a majority of the world's population, who the industrial economy would choose to leave behind, the undeveloped, undereducated, non-musicians, are currently revitalizing their own commons. Look at Bowers, Esteva, and Prakash and Esteva. This revitalization might be well established in Esteva's active verb, commoning, which he defines as reclaiming and regenerating commons and creating new commons beyond the dominant economic and political system. Commoning provides a challenge for music educators. Where previous generations of music educators have been involved in enclosure, music educators today might recommon musicians, and places where musics happen. Because it is only in its infancy, a full expression of what music education on soil will look like is uncertain. However, the recent qualitative research in place-based music education seems to point toward a humble practice, focused on connections to local, regional, and global responsibilities. One substantial detail arises. In cultures untouched by music education, it seems everyone musics, sings, dances, plays instruments, sometimes with gender-specific roles. Commoning may begin with reconnecting people to their right to be musicians. As Bates says, music is something everyone can do. You don't have to be helpless. You can do things even if you aren't a specialist, end quote. Music education on soil begins on actual soil, like growing a garden in a local place. Unlike global, generalizable knowledge, local places are not places of theoretical perfection. The garden is an unhappy place for the perfectionist. Too much stands beyond our control here, and the only thing we can absolutely count on is eventual catastrophe. Among the many, many things the green thumb knows is the consolation of the compost pile, and that's from Michael Pollan. In music education on soil, we ask deep questions, such as, what type of education will sustain life? And we look to lived practices, cases of people living sustainably in urban, suburban, and rural places, for inspiration. Lived practices. Like gardeners, because we stand on soil, we must be willing to relegate unsustainable practices to the compost pile, where, through the magic of Mother Nature, even the worst weeds become food for next year's life. Because soil is living, diverse and integrated in the next chapter, ecological literacy will be theorized as interdisciplinary. Now I figure 1-1, the modern individual enclosed and uprooted. Here's the image I created for that. And you can see how we're uprooted from the commons, enclosed from the commons, and uprooted from other people to really become this individual. Each of us, so, right? It keeps doing it, but we're trying to hold together. And I end with a haiku. Contemplating, meditating, where do you close? And do I open?